So the name of this park is Glen Providence. Now, Providence is a great name around here. Providence Road. What's a glen?
Trees. Trees.
A valley?
It's a valley, yeah.
Any particular kind of valley?
Steep valley?
Steep valley? Yeah. So a glen is a Scottish name, a Scottish word, for a narrow, steep valley. And from here, almost to Ridley Creek, it's a glen. So this is a great name for it. 35-acre park, 33-acre park.
Yeah, I think we're about 33, thereabouts, yeah.
What do we have right down here? A creek, a run, a rill, a stream. Yeah,
A crick, as we would say.
Crick?
in my end of
Yep,
town.
crick.
We call it the crick.
Too bad. DEP said from the edge of this dam, upstream, it was a 400-acre watershed, which is interesting fact. That, huh?
Be a lake.
Well,
to be a lake.
we'll get to that. We'll get to that. A high percentage of the 400 acres is what's called impervious surface. Roofs, driveways, streets. What happens when it rains? A half an inch. Now, one complicating thing about that is you may have noticed this funny loop up here in the corner or bump, and you may have noticed some of the erosion right here at the end of the road. This is primarily stormwater running down West Street. And the way the thing is paved, so that it meets 3rd Street so cars can go nicely instead of bumpy, bumpy, bumpy. The water misses that grate
Great.
and comes along this side of the road, and the water comes down here, and most of that misses this grate and comes right along here and erodes this. The whole thing about this is, and the reason why DEP took out the dam was that it was constructed in 1882 by Brumall, and to make a reservoir. DEP refuses to call that a lake or a pond. It's a reservoir because it's man-made dam. So that he could harvest ice every winter. And if we get around the corner here, you can see this is a whole precipitous drop-off. You can even see a little kind of a curve right there on the edge. This is the back wall of the ice house, which is perfect location. Faces northwest, on the side of the hill, hardly gets any sun. The ice stays there for a long time, and you can sell more of it. So DEP said, all right, we've had a lot of dam failures. This thing is more than 140 years old. We're taking it out. Yeah, but we're taking it out. So we'll see.
So it's been partially breached, essentially.
It's been breached down to the point where the bottom of the reservoir was. Didn't make a lot of difference in the park. During the construction and so on, there was a lot of silt and sand, mud deposited, so things changed a bit. But it's all the increasing amount of impervious material that the surface that the water lands on that keeps things eroding there. Let's head on down. Right below that tree trunk that's across the little rill, you can see a rock sticking out. A rock? You mean geology? I think that's actually bedrock, which means that's the rock that's underneath all this soil that allows all these trees to grow so big, to put all the leaves down and sop up all the water. And so the rocks are mostly buried. Some people are a little irreverent and say that the problem with all this ecosystem around here is all the damn biology covering up the good rocks. Yeah, whatever. I kind of like the woods too. But there are very few actual outcrops in the park, outcrops of real rock. I mean, there are lots of real rock, but part of the problem here is that people have been in this glen for what, 300 years?
Chipmunk.
Oh yeah, chipmunk.
Sorry.
There it goes.
There it goes.
And the kinds of things they have brought in, especially with the breaching of the dam and the creating of this spillway, there are all kinds of rocks that are not native, were not part of this glen. They were brought in. There's a great quarry in Glen Mills, and boy, it's got some interesting stuff. So anyway, just because you find a rock on the ground doesn't mean that it's from this glen. So the orientation of this glen, you all recognize that it's basically sort of straight. I mean, it has meanders, but it's not. If you look on the map, it's basically from here right down to Wrigley Creek. Is that strange, or is it local? Part of the geology all around here. Anybody know?
Probably means that it's a newer stream.
Good.
Because the ones that meander are the ones that are generally older.
That's very true. There is one aspect you didn't take into consideration. She's absolutely right, and that is the topography. Creeks coming down off hills tend to be straighter. The meandering ones tend to be on floodplains where it's flat. We do have some meanders here. I'll point them out, but not very many. The reason this is shaped or oriented the way it is, if you look at a careful map, and unfortunately they don't have a good one yet that I've ever found. I guess it's too well developed or something, and the Geological Survey doesn't care what's here. There are a lot of rocks, a lot of creeks that are in this orientation. And that has to do with the generalized history of the area. So that, I'm now blanking on the name, what's the one, Dismal Run coming down into Ridley Creek, and between Tyler and Ridley Creek. And several other creeks are all the same orientation. They're all straight down. The one that runs from Galia all the way down into Ridley Creek. They're all the same orientation because of the regional geology. We'll get into that pretty soon. So the other thing that we can notice, for instance, right here, and the parking lot for the swim club, on the other side of the parking lot, the slope comes down off Lemon down to the swimming pools at a nice angle. And 3rd Street comes down at a nice angle. This comes down at a nice angle. But there in the parking lot, it's almost straight down. It's very steep and then flat. I'll bet it was a quarry. And I'll bet they used the rocks for that quarry to build the ice house. Now, rocks are plentiful. They're all around the place. They're heavy. They're expensive. They're hard to move. You don't want to move a rock very far. It gets expensive. So local quarries are very common, even if they're small. That's all you need. Okay. Let's continue on to any questions? One of the things that I forgot to mention as we passed it there, but you can see that there's a little wet spot here. And there's no water right here, there's no water right here, and all of a sudden there's water running down. A spring. Actually, I call it a seep because it's not enough water. Just on the other side of the causeway that goes across is another one of these little seep streams that goes right back to the corner of the hillside and the dam, and that was available to, well, it was seeping, springing, in colonial times, and people would come get drinking water there and fill their big crockery, because they didn't have plastic yet, bottles and take it home. So it's really amazing the kinds of pottery shards you find in the creek. Unless you know something about ceramics, you have no idea how old that piece has been. If you see a Pepsi bottle, you know it's a little newer.
We have found old glasses, Charlie. I have a little collection at home of old glasses around those different areas
Yeah.
where people would have gone.
Good, yeah. And Stephanie and I found it was a Pepsi bottle or a Coke that had enough of a little code on the stamped on the bottom that it was made about 1953. Anyway, so these little seeps are around all over. Not real common, but not uncommon. The interesting thing is, because it is groundwater, the temperature of the water coming out here is about 50 some degrees Fahrenheit, winter and summer. So in the summertime, it's a little cooler than the water coming down. In the wintertime, it's actually noticeably warmer. Interesting. And these seeps are not necessarily part of the structural geology beneath, so they can be in any angle at all. What's this? Pond. According to DEP, is that a pond?
Reservoir.
That's a reservoir. What are we standing on?
Dam.
Well, this is the levee. The dam is down there. Yes, exactly. Because there is a creek, and there's sort of a creek. So this is all man-made, and I'm not sexist. They were. Part of the problem is, or one of the problems is, because of all the mud and silt and sand and so on, it's getting shallower and shallower and shallower. A year and a half ago, with the county's help, we got a Saturday morning crew in here and filled under the bridge there with several layers, 4 layers of sandbags. It's temporary, so we don't need any permit. It's still there. And sometimes the sandbags get rearranged a little bit by the same people who are making the dams and stuff up around. But the level has risen a little bit. And what color is it? Is the pond green? No. What's green?
Duckweed.
Duckweed, algae, several other names.
Yeah, we have some watercress growing down here. There's a big crop of watercress.
Okay, so why is this so? I mean, this isn't real typical. You're used to having some, but this is thick enough. It looks like you could drive across it most of the summer. Why is this so green here?
Fertilizers.
Fertilizer? You mean people fertilize the pond?
It's washing off.
Oh, it's washing off people's lawns. Yes. Part of that 400 acres watershed. Lots of not just fertilizer, but also herbicides. So this is what grows, which is okay. We're allowed to share and so on. The problem is, coming from now on, you'll see that more and more of the water and less of the green. What's happening to the leaves of they're sinking. When they get to the bottom, what do?
Decompose.
They rot. When they rot, what do?
Let off oxygen.
Suck in all the oxygen. So all of a sudden you got a dead pond.
Just remember, of all the stuff that you are buying at the store and throwing on your lawns, that's eventually going to drain somewhere.
Well, that's
gonna
our
affect a
plan,
lot
is to
more
get
than
people to
what
be
we
a
all
little
know.
bit more aware of that. Yeah.
I didn't realize this was watercress, which is good stuff, hey?
Yeah.
Okay, don't harvest it. Not only is it probably a good idea for the pond, but this is where it's really muckiest, although it's probably just as mucky in there. I almost lost a boot, and this was a calf-high boot, because it stayed in the muck and my foot didn't. I finally got them out, but don't go walking in there. There is a a substance called sapropel. Any etymologists here know the sapro or the pel?
Sapro is part of the soap plant family, right? Or no?
Not in this case.
Okay, that's a botanical thing.
Right, not in this case. The pel is like peelite or whatever. That means mud,
Ah,
clay. The sapro means rotten in this root.
okay.
So sapropel is rotten mud.
Oh,
How does mud rot? All the organics in with it.
yeah, right.
And the bottom of this pond is covered with sapropel,
Interesting.
which doesn't hold very much weight. So don't try to wade across, even if it looks shallow. The bottom of the pond is deeper. Now, here's where you can see it's a glen. Next week you'll see it a little better. Steep slope coming down, steep slope coming down. This is built up. That's normal, but this is part of the levee for the pond. So where this dirt came from, I have no idea. It may be from the dredging of the pond. Can you read the little plaque there?
It said 1949. It's waterfall in loving memory of Eleanor Reed Butler, presented by the Providence Park Club in 1949.
49. Okay. So this says it's a waterfall. Where does the water come from?
Rain.
Rain? Well, ultimately yes, but there's no creek coming down the hill.
Was there a former spring?
No, actually, it was even more subtle than that. Remember that the spring I told you about that the colonists used to come get their water? Well, in the late 40s, they took that, they put a pipe in that spring and brought it all the way over here, down very carefully measured. It came out here and went through that corrugated pipe out here. So there literally was water flowing down into a little, I don't know how much of a pond there was here. And the woman's name, Butler, is the one who donated the land to the county for a arboretum and natural preserve. So, but where do you suppose these rocks came from? To build the
Quarry back there.
The quarry back there, perhaps, yes. They do look like, and I have not gone through all of them, but a lot of them are the kind of schist that we find around here. Anybody know what a schist is?
You want to spell that, Charlie?
SCHI. Flaky. Why is it flaky?
Sedimentary.
No, it's actually metamorphic, but good. That's a lot of the sedimentary rocks are flaky. It has a lot of mica in it. Around here, it's mostly muscovite, which is the light-colored, clear-colored mica. But elements, layers of the schist around here have quite a bit of quartz. Have you ever looked at the PNC Bank on State Street? Yeah, State Street. What's that rock made? What's that building made of?
Same thing.
Wissahickon schist.
Yeah.
Really?
But it's the unit of the schist that has a lot of quartz in it. It's tough. It's flaky. You can see the mica in there, but it's solid. So schist is one of the most common kinds of rock in this area, and it's called Wissahickon schist because it's in this whole area, and that's where it was named. The kind of schist that doesn't have very much quartz, that is mostly mica, you put a lot of weight in it and it tends to go, which not really weight bearing. Anybody know any other kinds of rocks we're likely to find?
It's similar to shale rock.
Well, in a way. Layered, they're both layered. Shale is a sedimentary rock, which is mostly mud. It can have some mica that is brought in with the sediment. It gets compressed and isn't a real strong rock. You can usually break it. But what would happen, just for like chemistry experiment, what would happen if you baked the shale and really pushed it hard, squeezed it? You'd have a bunch of atoms rearranging themselves and minerals being transformed into mica. And you let it go, you let it cool off, you take the weight off, you got schist. You can't try that at home. It takes some pretty sophisticated stuff.
And about 1.5 million years, right?
Oh, well, actually in the lab you can do it a lot shorter than that, but yeah. So schist is one of the things that we have a lot of around here. So what happens if you put that schist back in your machine and heat it really up high and squeeze it like crazy? The minerals start to rearrange themselves again. And what you come up with is some gneiss. Now it's nice to pronounce nice, even though it isn't spelled that way. You want to, it's Gneiss, which is the same language root as schist, you can guess.
Sure.
Gneiss is banded. It has layers of darker and layers of whiter, and layers of darker. So it's a lot like schist, except it's more durable, it's hard, you don't have any soft squishy schist, or gneiss. And the schist tends to be, all the layers tend to be pretty much the same. In gneiss, it starts to separate. We do have some gneiss around here, but not a whole lot. And these are both normal kinds of metamorphic rocks. Any linguist here knows what metamorphic would be? Changes the shape. So it's not sedimentary, which is mud, sand. It's not igneous, fiery, rock, molten, lava, granite, basalt, obsidian. This is what happens when you start burying and squeezing metamorphic sedimentary rocks or igneous rocks to get metamorphic. They've changed their shape. Now, where on earth would you get places that would be hot and squeezed? Deep down, but why would it be changing at all? Well, we got a whole nother story here. Back about 130 years ago, no, not that many, there was a Swiss academic who had a PhD in astronomy, but he noticed that the coast of Africa does this, the Atlantic coast, and the Atlantic coast of South America does this. What would happen if you put them together? Just what would happen? And he found that the kinds of rocks, the ages of rocks, the fossils matched. He said they must have been together. These were two continents that drifted apart. Well, he was an astronomer. He didn't understand all the physics of moving solid rock through solid rock. And all the geologists, the geophysicists, quote, they weren't there yet, said, that can't happen. Forget it. Well, people did forget it, except they couldn't really ignore the evidence. So during World War II, there was a young guy, I don't know if he was a graduate student or a new prof, called Harry Hess, who was hired by the Navy to come up with a way of detecting submarines underwater magnetically. In order to have something that big, that has that much pressure resistance so people can actually live inside it, it has to be pretty solid steel. So it's magnetic. So he was back and forth across the Atlantic, and he noticed there's a background pattern, kind of vertical north-south stripes of north-facing magnets and south-facing, and north-facing and south-facing. And he said, wow, that's interesting. And then he realized it was actually symmetrical across a place in the middle of the Atlantic. He said, oh. So he went back to Colombia as soon as the war was over. He never did get a good way to find subs. But he used this information and spent a lot of time and crossed all of his T's and dotted all of his I's. And he said, what happens is we have plates, and the plates are moving apart, so that Europe and North America are getting farther apart every year. Millimeters, but farther apart. And what happens is new rock is coming up, not really volcanism, but magma coming up and freezing and being part of the plates. You probably heard that every now and then the magnetic field of the Earth switches. So the now north points north, our compass north. As soon as it switches, that north arrow is going to be pointing south. And this is what he was finding across the Atlantic. He said, no, if it happens here, it's got to happen someplace else. You can't, that would just be making the Earth a balloon, getting bigger and bigger and bigger. That isn't happening. So it's got to be going underneath someplace. Well, you don't just put a plate underneath and just say, What happens is you got this kind of a thing. And what are these?
Mountains.
The Aleutians, the Andes, Japan, the Alps, all over. So he was saying, now, just because this isn't just 2D, this isn't just a piece of paper doing this and this, what happens up here? And he realized that what happens up here is you got two plates sliding past each other. Ever heard of the San Andreas? We figured out once when I was a TA, we kind of fudged history a little bit and made the arithmetic a little easier and asked the students to figure out how long it would take for LA to become a suburb of San Francisco. And it was about 6.5 million years, as I remember. Don't hold me to it. So we got a whole system, three-dimensional, spherical system of moving plates. So Hess said, I know, that was 1960 something, that was only 45 years or so after Wegener was laughed off the block. So this is why he did so much research and he finally presented his paper and people said, oh, they're geophysicists. Well, let's look at this. Well, this is about the time that the United States government was putting up seismometers all around the world, seismographs all around the world to detect Russian nuclear blasts. If you have an earthquake doing this, you get a push here and a pull here, push-pull waves. Push first, pull first from this machine, from this sensor. Opposite down here. For nuclear blast, push every place first. So they were looking at how this was working, and they, with a number of stations around the world, they could pinpoint exactly where these blasts were happening. So ever heard of the Good Friday earthquake at Anchorage? Yes. 1964? Yes. They had the kinds of seismographs in place to show that it was doing this. And the mountains, the volcanoes, and maybe Hess was right. So around here, we have been through 4 different orogenies. And oro means mountain, and geni means making it up, creating it. So 4 mountain building episodes. One was about 1,000 million years ago. That's a billion years. We don't remember that. One was a tectonic, about 500 to 440 million years ago. Pretty old. One was the Akkadian, and the most recent was the Appalachian. And that's where Africa came sliding into North America and crunch things. And that's why the mountains in Pennsylvania do this kind of thing instead of just coming down the way they had been. They got pushed out. Now, if you've got two big pieces of rock, down deep it's warm, the rock is pushing like crazy, you suppose you get heat and pressure? You suppose that's how you make metamorphic rocks? What happens if you metamorphose metamorphic rocks? It leaves a tail. I can tell you that I know at least 3 of these things happen from my own research on metamorphic rocks. Some people say 5. Yeah, well, it could be, I guess, maybe. We'll have to see about that. But 3 for sure. So, and that also is why we have so many parallel creeks. Because when Africa was doing this to North America, everything was being lined up this way. And apparently 50 years, no more than that, there was somebody who offered a pretty good reward for somebody who could find the first honest-to-goodness fossil in the Wissahickon schist. Nobody ever claimed the prize. And when we started doing this Harry Hess stuff and looking at how metamorphic rocks happen, they realized that if the head of the trilobite were over here, the tail of the trilobite might be half a mile away. It's hard to identify which one's which. Hard to even identify the head. So that's the kind of slippery stuff that schist has deep underground. Now, one other complication, if I may be just a little more, when you have continents drifting and hitting each other and so on, not all the continents are actually all just granite or all just schist. And you get stuff coming up and moving around. It's kind of complex. One of the marvelous examples of this is the west coast of Newfoundland on that mountain range. There is a lot of rock that is high in magnesium. These are very dark rocks and heavy, dense. We have several kinds, pods of this rock around here. One is Mineral Hill. One is the Pine Barrens. One is under DCCC. One is under a housing development that's old. Right off Route 3, just toward us from 252, and I don't remember the name of the place right now. But it's a knob, it's a hill on the side of, and there are a lot of, these are what's called ultramafics or bluestones, or greenstones. Another more geology buzzwords. Felsic is feldspar in silica quartz. And these are light colored, sort of lighter weight, lighter density granite. Then you have the intermediate stuff, and then you have the mafic, which is magnesium and iron. Mafic, iron being ferric. And these are the basalts and so on. And then you have the lower silica. Then you have the ultramafic, which is much higher in magnesium and much lower in silica. And this is where you get the serpentine and all of that. The serpentine is part of the what's in Tyler and we were just talking about. Yeah. Yeah. That's again part of this blob that is in Newfoundland and all these other places that have ultramafic. So it's a whole range, and sometimes you wonder how can you have all that in one place? Well, it isn't in one place, but it is kind of segregated. Yeah.
That way too.
Yeah, yeah. This pretty much completes my clipboard.
Thank you very much.
Yes? You bet. Thank you.